Hello, you're listening to Sending the Experts with Georgina Durrant. This podcast is all about teaching and supporting children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities, SEND. My name is Georgina Durrant. I'm the host of this podcast brought to you by Twinkle SEND. As a former teacher in SENDCO myself, I wanted to create a platform to share some of the amazing things that my guests are doing to support learners with SEND. So whether you're listening on your commute, tuning in whilst walking your dog, or curled up on the sofa with a nice cup of coffee, thank you so much for joining us. In this episode, I am thrilled to be joined by Beth Smithson. Beth is an experienced occupational therapist and advanced sensory integration practitioner with 20 years of clinical practice working with children, young people and families across health, education and social care. She has worked in primary and secondary, mainstream and specialist provisions and has led integrated occupational therapy services both in the UK and internationally. And Beth is passionate about creating environments that support participation and well-being through a deep understanding of sensory processing. And she currently works for Sensory Integration Education as their Director of Lifelong Learning and lead for Sensory Inclusive Schools. Hi, Beth. Lovely to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
No worries at all. I'm really pleased to have you on here. It's a really interesting topic, is sensory processing and sensory integration. And I know it's becoming a little bit more well known, which is good, but obviously we can do our little bit to make it even more well known and sort of raise that awareness, which I think is important. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I always like people to do this. I know I've introduced you with your wonderful bio, but tell our listeners or viewers a little bit about yourself and your experience, as well as what you're doing now. So a bit more detail to what I've given, really.
Absolutely. So as your brilliant introduction, thank you very much. My name's Beth. I'm an OT by background, and I've had a very, very varied and enjoyable career. So over the last 20 years, I've spent my career mainly working with children, young people and families. As you said, that's seen me working in mainstream schools, both primary and secondary. I've been school employed within specialist provisions, so experienced all sort of a wide variety of educational delivery, as well as working in homes and clinics. So at the moment, I work for an organisation called Sensory Integration Education. We're a not-for-profit organisation, and our mission is to raise awareness of sensory processing integration and provide high quality training for everyone who's interested in this area. And I support a project called Sensory Inclusive Schools. And this came about from my experience of working within NHS occupational therapy services, where there is a gap, there's a need for schools to be supported within the areas of sensory integration and sensory processing. And it's a real postcode lottery out there, whether you get the support and the type of support you get. So we wanted to implement a national project to enable schools to receive support in this area. So that's me. And as you said, my passion is absolutely about spreading awareness and making sure people are really embedding evidence-informed practice in order to support all learners remain in school around specifically their sensory processing and integration differences.
Brilliant. And that sort of reflects a lot of the work we're doing at Twinkle in terms of the evidence formed. It's really, really important, isn't it? Now more than ever. You know, there's a lot of problems with the SEND system at the moment and people are trying to find answers, and it's really important that we do have evidence informed answers and we're following the correctly backed, research backed evidence when we're doing things. So just for people who might not be aware, what is sensory integration? Because you said you want to raise awareness, so now's your opportunity. Tell us what sensory integration actually is.
So we'll take a step one back first. So when we talk about sensory, generally when we're talking about sensory integration and sensory processing, we're talking about 8 senses. Yes. So there's 5 senses we all know about: vision, sound, our touch, our taste and smell. And people tend to know what they are. We learned about those in school, but we have 3 other senses that we consider: our vestibular sense, which is our sense of movement; our proprioceptive sense, which is our sense of body awareness; and our interoception sense, our sense of interoception, which is about understanding our internal body cues. So these 8 senses. And sensory integration and processing is a way that our brain receives the information from these 8 senses, organises it, makes sense of it, matches it all together, marries it all together. How are we all going to work together and we produce either a behaviour or we produce a motor response. So it really we organise ourselves and we organise our behaviour and we organise our bodies through the processing and the integration of these 8 senses. And I think it's really important here to say that we're all sensory beings. This is something that we are doing all the time. It's not limited to an age or limited to a diagnosis. We are all sensory beings and we're all using sensory processing and sensory integration to make sense of the world around us and how we have to be in our environments.
Yeah.
And when it works well, this happens automatically. It's something that we're not aware we're doing. But as I said, we're all different. We have sensory processing differences, and that's unique and that's brilliant. So no two people will experience a sensation in the same way. You'll experience sound or taste or sight different to me. They're our sensory processing differences, and they need to be embraced. We then fall into the realm of maybe difficulties.
Yeah.
I believe when our environment and when the tasks we're asked to do within our environment don't acknowledge our unique way we process the sensory world around us. Okay, then we're slipping into maybe sensory processing difficulties. There's nothing wrong with the difference. There's nothing wrong with the way that I'm processing the sensation. The difficulty is now occurring because the environment you put me in or the task you're asking me to do doesn't support that.
Yeah.
And as I said, we all have differences which need to be embraced, but we do know within certain populations, differences are maybe more prominent.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, students with autistic students, we know there's a significantly higher prevalence of sensory processing differences.
Yeah.
Students with ADHD, absolutely higher rate of sensory processing differences. And also within ourselves, because sensory processing involves our neural networks and our hormones and our neurotransmitters, there's going to be times in our lives when our sensory processing differences change. Think of times in your lives where we have key hormonal changes, puberty, perimenopause, menopause. These are all going to be periods of our lives where we're going to also be experiencing differences or changes or how we perceive our sensory world around us. So those of you working with students who may be neurodivergent, but also going through puberty, or just students going through puberty as well, we may see changes occurring at this time as well, because there's going to be a change in their neurobiology.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That echoes what we had Colin Foley from the ADHD Foundation on the podcast recently. He was talking very similarly about ADHD and the impact of hormones, and girls in particular being the ones that when they're not predominant, not always girls, but girls who might be starting secondary school suddenly displaying different behaviours, not listening in lessons, finding it difficult, and people being like, why? And it ending up being that they have ADHD, they've managed at primary school, they've hit puberty, and it's, in terms of neurobiology, it's really impacted on like dopamine, I think it was, and correct me if I'm wrong, because this isn't my expertise, but yeah, it was to do with all the neurotransmitters, etc., and all the hormones impacting on that, which is fascinating, really
absolutely
fascinating.
So our neurotransmitters enable a signal from one cell to the other cell to happen, right? So that sensory system to go across, to jump across those cells, our neurotransmitters are essential for that. Hormones, essential for that. So absolutely, puberty, people listening, myself going through the perimenopause at the moment, absolutely, I'm noticing changes in the way that I'm processing my sensory experiences. It's significant, and especially when you may be thinking, absolutely, you've mentioned that maybe students who are already struggling, they're going to be entering a period where these changes are going to happen to them. We just need to be really extra cautious of what's going on for them.
Absolutely. It's really, really interesting stuff, and really important to understand as well, because, for parents who are listening or teachers, it sort of explains a lot of things and helps them unpick why somebody might be struggling or why. And I think what's tricky as well is, like you said, we all experience the world around us in a different way. So it's hard to imagine if you think your classroom is great for you sensory wide, it's not too loud, it's not too noisy, it's not too bright, all of these things, it can be hard to imagine that it's different for somebody else. And I think that's what's tricky, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I see many teachers and therapists, but many brilliant TAs who maybe one of the areas that they haven't thought about is that they may be designing lesson plans or designing environments to meet their sensory needs.
Yeah.
So, for example, so because I like things that are loud and bright and fast, I might be designing a lesson that's high intensity, it's funny, it's loud, we're clapping, we're singing. And yes, great teacher, great TA, because you want it to be fun. But absolutely, you may have a child where, oh my goodness, they process the world differently. And that high energy, exciting, loud, fast, noisy, bright lesson that you've planned, which is absolutely fantastic, not for them.
No.
And there's a mismatch.
Yeah.
And it's hard, isn't it? Because in a classroom as well, we've got 30 plus people, all with different ways of experiencing the world, all within one environment. So we've got, 30, 35 different nervous systems,
Yeah.
all experiencing and all needing different things in one environment. It is hard.
My next question, and it wasn't on our list, but you can solve this for me. How would a teacher solve? Because there'll be teachers listening saying, yeah, you're right, Beth, absolutely. I've got children who are hypersensitive to this. I've got children who are hyposensitive to this, etc. Children who are seeking senses, children who are finding my bright lights too much. There's children who want the sort of muted displays. There's children who want the loud displays. How can they keep everybody regulated and in? Is it possible? Like, what's the answer, or what's the best they can be doing, I suppose?
And it is hard. This is hard because, and this is why we haven't got it right in education, right? Because there isn't an easy answer to this. And my clinical caseload now is supporting mainly secondary school students who are unable to attend school for this reason. Okay, largely because of sensory integration and process, and they just can't tolerate that environment. So it's difficult. It's hard, and I think we can explore this now, or can we explore this as we go through. There isn't an easy answer. There isn't an easy answer, and I think there are universal, what we call safe for most, or will support most people. And they're the strategies that we look to for people to go as a starting place. So these are strategies that involve looking at the person, looking at the environment, and looking at the occupation. And in OT, we have a model called the PEO model, person, environment, occupation. And what this model tells us is that we have to look at all three elements: person, environment, occupation. And if you get those right, in the middle, you get participation and engagement. So I'm moving away from your question, but my answer in a roundabout way, and I'm sure we'll chat more about this, is in order to really address everyone's needs, you have to be looking at all three elements from a universal safe for most perspective. The person, the environment, the occupation. So if we look at what I would consider universal safe for most for all of those, I'm going to start with the environment, and I'm very deliberate about starting with the environment. Because what we tend to do is we see a young person who's struggling in the classroom, and we say, what do they have to do to change to be able to fit in? Okay, we're all guilty of it as therapists. I was guilty of it as well. We walk in, this student can't be in the classroom. What do you need to change? Now, that puts a lot of emphasis, a lot of stress on the young person to have to do something about it themselves. And it's not their fault. Their nervous system is unique. It's brilliant. It's as it should be. Okay. But they've been put into an environment that they have no choice or control over. So we have choice and control over the environments that we go into. Okay, so my sensory processing differences mean that I don't choose to go anywhere that's too noisy. Okay, I choose not to do that. I don't work in a busy office. Absolutely fine. I've got choice. If I am in an environment that then I do find dysregulating, upsetting, I can control that. As an adult, I can say, do you know what? I'm going to leave. Or I might take I might be able to say, okay, I'll stay here for a little bit and then I'll leave. Or I might take maybe earphones with me. I have choice, I have control, I can advocate for myself. But young people are put into environments where they have no choice, they have no control. And then there's the expectation we go straight to the P, straight to the person. You need to do something about a situation you've got no choice and control over.
Yeah.
So when I go to sensory as a younger therapist, I'd always go straight in, oh, let's take them out. Let's do proprioception. I don't start there anymore. I go straight to the E and the O. Okay, what is about this environment that we can change? So universal things that I'd like to see in every single classroom are predictability. That's not quite an environmental adaptation, but you've probably heard we've had lots of talks about how predictability means safety. And definitely from a sensory perspective, predictability promotes that. If I am experiencing the world being overwhelming, I want to know if there's going to change going to happen. I want to know whether my lesson's happening in the classroom that I can manage or the classroom I can't manage. That makes a massive difference to me and my anxiety and my mental health.
And it's how long you can tolerate it for. I'm just thinking at the weekend, for example, Beth, I had to go to a school summer fair. And because of the awful weather this weekend, it was inside in a school hall. And I don't have any sensible processing difficulties as such, but I was finding it overwhelming and difficult, if I'm honest. When I was in that room, it was very, very loud. There was lots of children, as you can imagine. We're all cramped in one area and it was overwhelming. I knew it was going to finish in half an hour, and I knew I was able to finish. And when you're talking about that predictability, I thought, yeah, this is an absolute nightmare. I'm not really enjoying myself. But I thought I've only got half an hour to go and then I can leave. I also thought I could nip outside if I need to. So it's that control thing. I was told that I could leave when I needed to. And yeah, so if you're a child and you're in that sort of situation, or if I was in that sort of situation and I didn't know any predictability about how long I was going to be in that situation for, if I could have a break from it, how I could get out of it, I would have struggled. And I'm an adult and I don't know if I have any particular sensory processing difficulties, but I was definitely finding it difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Predictably. And how many of your experts have come on and said predictability is key for a whole world of things? Yeah. Absolutely. So how can I, as you just said, can I tolerate being in this heightened state of alertness? Well, maybe for 10 minutes I can. Yeah. So you've told me this is going to end in 10 minutes. So I can do that for 10 minutes. It's not going to be pleasant. It's got to be nice, but I can tolerate it. But if I don't know, oh my goodness. So predictability is key through the use of visuals, timetabling, but we all know schools are unpredictable places. Yep, I do an activity in some of my workshops and I try to get people to identify what are the predictable parts of your school routines. And they may say things like, oh, break time's always 15 minutes. That's predictable. But I'm like, well, is it? What if it's wet play? What if it's extremely hot? Or lunchtime always happens at 12 o'clock. Well, does it really? What happens if you're stuck in a maths lesson and it hasn't quite finished on time and now it's 12:01, 12:02? So there's no predictability in the school moment, but we can communicate unpredictability. So it's about being able to communicate when the unpredictable happens. So predictability is huge as a universal environmental strategy. The other thing I would like to see in every class is flight paths. And I talk about flight paths a lot. So our brain is quite simple on some levels. When it feels under threat, and in this case, maybe under threat from our sensations, our environment, our sensory experiences, we will decide it has to keep itself safe. Yep. And to keep itself safe, you probably heard of the fight, flight, freeze, and then you get some few more flop form. But we'll talk about just today fight, flight, and freeze. So I'm under threat from sensory. I've perceived this sound, this smell, this touch as threatening. I'm either going to decide, okay, am I going to fight? So am I going to try and fight and get rid of this sensory stimulus? Because if I can fight it and it goes away, it will never come back. What does fighting look like in our students? Maybe being verbally loud. I don't want to say aggressive because we're not going to put any these are not subjective. We can't put subjective interpretations onto behaviours. So they may be shouting. We might see people start to hit, maybe kick, because they're trying to get rid of this stimulus.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to fight. We're going to freeze, which means I'm going to block down, shut out everything, which is not a good state to be in. Or we're going to flee, we're going to fly. I'm going to remove myself from this sensory sensation, and then I'm going to be okay. So in the classroom, we don't want fight. We don't really want freeze. So we have to have opportunity for flight paths. Okay.
Point.
So what I'm not saying, we have the doors open and the students running down corridors, fleeing the classroom. Absolutely not. I'm saying that there has to be a route or a path that students, when they're in that state of this is so much, I'm so dysregulated, I'm so overwhelmed, I've got the opportunity to remove myself. Now, this could be removal to traditionally a quiet corner. Some classes may have a tent in the corner. Some children may want to go under their desk, but somewhere a route. And for some students, absolutely, it will be out the classroom somewhere else.
Yeah.
But a flight path, this is too much, I need to leave. That will then, I will not turn to freeze or fight.
Yeah.
Now, flight paths, has to be rehearsed and practiced when you're not in that heightened state. Because when we're in that heightened state of trying to protect ourselves, we all know we lose the ability for verbal language to those higher centers of the brain, that's cognition and reasoning, that all goes. And we rely on purely our motor responses. Yeah, it goes down to what is my motor memory. So we have to practice these students being able to leave to wherever you want them to go while they're calm. So when they are dysregulated, their motor, their muscles take over and they just go. So important. When I worked in the special school, we had a lot of students who had to leave the classroom as part of their flight path. But and for safety reasons, we couldn't have those doors freely open within the corridors. So we rehearsed a pause in the flight path. So when they were regulated, when they weren't in a heightened state, we would practice. When you do need to flee, you get up, you go to the door. We had a wait sign where they'd put their hands, so they learned that there was a pause before someone that could then come with them to go out. So we learn that, we teach the flight path, and the flight path needs to lead to a space where someone feels sensory safer. We can't have sensory safe spaces. I think that's asking too much within these communal environments, but somewhere that's sensory safer for them to be. So what I'm saying a lot now. So my universal pleas would be predictability about the environment, flight paths that lead to a sensory safer place. And I think if you do just those two, you'll see a significant change.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Within the occupation, if we're looking at the O part, the tasks we're asking people to do, it's recognizing that when we ask too much of a student in any task, we see dysregulation. From a sensory perspective, sensory processing is not just about feeling your sensations more than others or less than others. It's about motor as well. So our sensory integration impacts on our ability to perform new and novel motor tasks. So if I'm giving a student a motor task that's too hard, dressing for PE itself, learning how to write and hold a pen, moving my eyes so I can read. If the motor task is too hard, the occupation is too hard, I'm going to withdraw, refuse, become dysregulating. And it's about how you teach that occupation as well. So sensory processing as well impacts again on that motor, but it's more than just having the motor skills to be able to do something. It's about being able to plan. This is called praxis. So praxis is the ability to have an idea about a movement, being able to make a plan, and then being able to do the motor. This is all dependent on our ability to integrate and process our senses. So what that I mean by that, I mean, if I'm asking as a teacher, is if I say to a student who has difficulty with the ideation part of practice, I can't come up with ideas. If I just say, go off and draw. Not going to do it.
Yeah.
Can't do it. I
Yeah.
don't have the idea. If I am a teacher and I have a student who's having difficulties with the planning part of a praxis, I might say, go off and draw a circle. Right, I've got the idea. Don't know how to do it. I can't make that motor plan.
Yeah.
Or again, I might have difficulty with the execution. So I know to draw that, as a teacher, actually given the instruction, I can go off, I can go draw that circle, but now I'm stuck because my hand won't move on the page.
Yeah.
So it's like that scaffolding learning in order to meet those sensory demands as well. I've talked a lot there. I apologise.
So interesting.
And the thing is, and I want to talk a lot about this. I want to talk about the environmental adaptations. I want to talk about how we teach and how we present learning opportunities, because I want to remove the responsibility from the student's nervous system. It's not up to them to change. Saying that, there are universal, safe for most sensory opportunities we can give to students, because there are going to be circumstances in life where you are in environments and you are being asked to do things, and you need to be able to support your sensory system as much as you can to stay regulated. And there we go to proprioception and movement. So proprioception is our sense of body awareness. We generate proprioception when we move our body against resistance. It's active. When I push, when I pull, when I lift, when I carry, when I chewing, I see chewing a lot in schools, I generate proprioception. And proprioception is fantastic. It is the most regulating sense for the whole nervous system. It's got the ability to calm and alert or everything else. So if you don't know why a student is dysregulated, if you've got no idea, is it touch, is it smell, are they experiencing things more or less, or they're not discriminating, proprioception will help support all of that. So we go there. The other universal person strategy is we're going to embrace movement. You've probably all heard it. We are going to embrace movement, because through movement, again, movement is a regulating sensory input. It also helps with proprioception, gives us awareness of our body. So my two universal person is embrace proprioception, lots of pulling, pushing, lifting, carrying, chewing, and embrace movement. So I spoke a lot then.
It was brilliant. I was sat there like, this is amazing. I'm learning so much. And I'm sure our listeners and viewers are thinking the same. That's fantastic. I suppose one of the things then is how, so we know lots of children have sensory processing differences, and we know that everybody processes the world in a different way. How are teachers going to, because I know occupational therapists are brilliant, but there aren't a lot of you available in schools at the moment, which is a whole other thing that we might not touch on. But I'm sure you could talk a lot about that, Beth. But how can teachers notice if a child might be struggling with sensory processing differences in their classroom, whether it be because of them or because of the environment that's around them? How will they know if there's a child struggling with the environment and the sensory processing in their classroom?
Absolutely. And this is going to be wide and varied for different students. And I'm going to invite everyone to see a student that might be struggling, not engaging, withdrawing, viewing behaviour with a sensory lens. So I'm going to take you there for a moment, because we all know behaviour can be exhibited for a wide reasons. We're going to go there through a sensory lens. So we've touched on kind of the differences, or the categories of differences we tend to classify people into. So we have maybe people who experience sensation more than others. We have people who experience sensations less than others. That's modulation. Or we have people who have difficulty with discrimination of their senses. So discrimination is about understanding the properties. So if I've got a pen in my hand, viewers can see me with the pen in my hand, but if you're listening, I have a pen in my hand. So my tactile discrimination will tell me there's a pen in my hand, but is it rough? Is it bumpy? Is it smooth? it will tell me all those lovely properties of sensation. Okay.
Yeah.
It will also tell me I'm actually holding it in my hand and it's not balanced on my head. It
Yeah.
tells me the properties. So we've got different things here. So let's look at some behaviors that may indicate that something maybe that there may be something different for this student. So if I experience sensations that are more than others, if I experience it more than my peers, generally I'm going to avoid these
Yeah.
this sensation. So let's look at sound, for example. If I experience sound as more than others, put me in a noisy room, you may see me covering my ears. You may see me refusing to go into a noisy classroom. You may see me actively, or you may see me doing behaviors to try and get out of the task that involves a noise. I'm going to withdraw, I'm going to refuse, I'm going to disengage, because
Yeah.
ultimately this sensation is noisy, it's threatening. I need to keep myself safe. Do you know, we're talking about those
Yeah.
fight, flight, and freeze behaviors.
And these will be the ones as well. I'm just thinking, like in the dinner hall, if you're a primary school teacher, it's the kids in the dinner hall who are struggling as well, isn't it? Because it's not just lessons. I know the dinner hall can be a real
Absolutely.
difficulty. I feel like I want to do a campaign on dinner halls, if I'm honest,
Yeah.
Beth. If you want to join me on
So
this? I think
dinner
they are a
halls,
sensory nightmare.
they are a sensory nightmare. So let's take the dinner hall. So if I am a student who experiences noise more than others, vision more than others, and let's just take smell more than others, the food hall is going to be hideous.
Yeah.
Okay, it's noisy, it's clattery, it's normally echoey because they're in halls, they're not in carpeted rooms. Everyone's walking around, so visually, and the smell over. Actually, it's interesting because I find a lot of students can't tolerate the canteen areas because of smell more than anything else.
Yeah. I hated
Smell,
it as a child. When you're talking about it, it's bringing back a lot of memories. Maybe I do have
yeah,
some sensory processing needs that I'm becoming
absolutely.
aware of in this call, but I
We
used
all do.
to
We
hate
all
the
do.
dinner hall. Like, absolutely. I would be nervous about it. I would hate the
Yeah,
smell, the clatter of the trays, the
yeah,
people moving around me, people knocking into me, all of that.
yeah.
Horrible.
So ultimately, you're going to avoid those areas. Yeah. That's your flight,
Yeah, eat my lunch.
or you're,
Go.
yep, or you're going to fight. So you're going to be disruptive in those environments.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or you're going to freeze. You're not going to eat. You're just going to sit there, freeze for your own protection.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's your response if the world is too much, because ultimately it's a threat,
Mm.
and we have to keep ourselves safe from external threats. Smell is really interesting. Smell's my favorite sense, if I can have a favorite sense.
Have a favorite
The
sense. You're an OT.
smell is something we often don't look at, but smell is processed in the same part of the brain where emotion is attached to memory. And smell is different to our other senses. It doesn't go through the thalamus, which is like our sorting system. So we can have really, really, really strong behavioral responses to smell, or really strong autonomic nervous system responses to smell. So
Yeah.
ultimately, when we're dysregulated, it's our autonomic nervous system that's kicking in, getting ready for this fight and flight. So the adrenaline, the heart rate going up, the feelings of nausea, these are all real physiological responses, and smell can be a real driver in that. And I've had many kids that won't go into classrooms because they cleaned the classrooms that morning. They can't tolerate the smell. Toilets are a
Yeah.
smell nightmare. Um, and have people and students having to use accessible toilets
Yeah.
because of things like the smell. So I suppose I invite you to look at all the senses. Don't jump to the very obvious ones. So you might think, oh, lunch hall's noisy. It's very noisy in there. No, systematically just think, well, could it be vision? Could it be taste? Could it be smell? Could it be proprioception? Could it be interoception? Really be inquisitive about what it could be.
Yeah.
So going back to the behaviours, sorry, we kind of jumped onto another topic there. So if I'm experiencing things too much, I'm going to fight, flight, free,
Yeah.
avoid, fight, or shut down. If I experience sensations less than others, it's going to take me a lot more of that sensation to register and get going. So that's the kid that I'm clapping, because you've all got those kids, you're like, Beth, 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 come on, are you listening? Kind of those kids that you really feel like they need. I'm not advocating shaking a child, but they need a bit of a shake. They need a bit of a jiggle, that you need to do something to them to get them going. Okay, because their brain is not picking up sensations as it should do. It needs more. I need
Yeah.
more sensations to get me going. So these students are normally the passive students in class, and these are the students I worry about, because our referrals are mainly for the students who are bouncing all over the place. They're
Yeah.
for the students that don't sit still. They're for the students that will be shouting out, the impulsive students. They get referred. The students who are passively sitting in the corner, not responding, not causing any issues, these are our students who experience their sensations less than others because they are not a behavioural difficulty in the class. They don't get referred, but we see them later on in mental health services because they hide and they mask their difficulties, and they're not picked up and they're not seen. So these are the quiet ones that I worry about, that
Yeah.
we are less good. That's not good English, but we're not as good as picking those up and
Yeah.
referring those on for support. The other group of or the other classification is this discrimination piece. Okay, so this is, I'm getting this information, I'm getting this sensory input, I'm not quite sure what it means. So these are, and this impacts our motor skills. So so it impacts things like our posture. Okay. So these are the students, if they have differences in how they're discriminating vestibular, so their movement and their body awareness. So I know I'm moving, I'm not quite sure if I'm upside down or not. I'm not quite sure where my body is in space. I think my arms are attached to my body, but I'm not quite sure. These are the students that can't stay in their chair, not because of maybe they're under responsive to movement, but they can't. They don't have the motor skills to stay in their chair. They don't have the postural skills to stay sitting still. They don't have the ability to coordinate their body. So we see students here again who can't sit still. They'll be slumping over the carpet. They'll be leaning on other students. They won't be able to stand still in line. They won't be coordinated in their movement. So you'll notice they might run with an odd, they don't run like they should do. It might be a bit uncoordinated. They have real trouble with learning new tasks. So give them maybe a compass and a pencil, and now I have no idea how to do that. They're slow at dressing for PE. They can't do their shoelaces up. These are all signs that they may have some sensory differences with their sensory discrimination that's impacting on their motor skills. Again, we're bad at picking this up, and it has a significant impact on participation. Significant. If you imagine, if you don't have the mode that we call it oculomotor, the ability to move your eyes backwards and forwards in a controlled way, that's our visual and our vestibular system working together. If you can't do that, you're not going to be able to copy off the board. You're not going to be able to read a page, your eyes moving backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
Um, if you just physically can't engage, play, younger children, I see this a lot. Okay, so students with sensory motor differences in the early years, they often won't go to the home corner, not because they don't have an imaginative play, they don't have the motor skills to engage in skills like, oh, let's do up the buttons on this dressing up set, or I'm going to set up a tea set and we're going to pour. We're going to pour and all have a nice cup of tea together. That's quite complex motor skills.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stick to simple games: running, chasing, tag. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to line my cars up because that's really easy to do. I can line my cars up.
Mm.
I'm only going to pick toys that I can maybe push, because pushing's a really simple motor skill. Give me a toy that I then have to twist, not going to do it. So I'm going to choose not to play with it. So younger students, I see a very limited repertoire of play skills,
Yeah.
very limited repertoire of toys. And difficulty with social communication because I don't have the motor skills to engage with you in play. And we see that as the child gets older. So if I'm a child with praxis, we call this praxis or sensory motor differences, I'm in the playground. I might have been practicing kicking that football for months, right? I'm going to play football. I've been kicking it for months. All of a sudden, you move on to basketball. I've been practicing football for the last 6 months. There's no way now. I'm so disheartened. You've moved on to basketball. I'm now not going to play with you. So again, our motor skills lead to lots of social exclusion, as well as educational exclusion. And motor skills are not picked up, and they're significant. We know, again, autistic students, significantly higher rate of motor differences. Again, in ADHD, motor differences, and it's not picked up. And from a sensory perspective, it is as important, or it feeds into regulation as much as being over or under responsive to sensation.
That's so interesting. And you know, when you're speaking as well, you in my head are children that I've taught, and I'm thinking, gosh, that's so and so, or that's so and so. And obviously I can't diagnose, but you're thinking, gosh, did they have that need and I wasn't aware? And I bet there's teachers hopefully watching and listening who are thinking the same. Maybe there's a child, like you were saying, with the home corner who isn't engaging with the home corner, and previously they thought, oh, they just don't enjoy, perhaps their friends aren't doing it, or it's just not something they enjoy, and that's okay. But maybe it is, maybe now they're thinking perhaps it is motor difficulties and it's something to do with that, and maybe we need to be looking into this a little bit more. So really open my eyes, Beth. It's
absolutely
really important.
Please consider motor. My passion is sensory motor, so I always see behavior and think motor, which is very, very, it may be a different lens to view behavior through. But absolutely, you may have a child who is desperately wanting to play with their peers, but because of their sensory processing differences, and because they don't have they struggle with praxis, they can't form the idea for play, they can't make the motor plan for play, and then they don't have the motor skills to execute play. That is sensory integration and processing, as much as over and under responsive. I can't say that enough.
And then that can impact, you know, on speech and language as well, because they're not having that time to practice. Because I'm thinking again about the home corner issue, because it's a brilliant example. If you're thinking about if the child is put off by the home corner because of those sort of difficulty, these motor skills, they're the situations where you're practicing your speech more, aren't they? You're practicing communication, you're learning to take turns, you're acting out different situations where you're at this coffee shop or whatever these children are doing nowadays. Maybe they're at Costa in their heads and they're playing at Costa, whatever. But they're doing these different situations that they're practicing, and they're practicing saying things to each other. And if you're purposefully not drawn to that, or you are drawn to it, but you're purposefully avoiding that because of your motor difficulties, and you're doing things like just chasing, like you were saying, you don't get that much chat, do you?
No, but I can engage in that. And
boys running around.
Absolutely, but they're
not doing the same conversation as a group would be in the home corner.
But chasing, I'm successful. I can engage with that, and I don't look any different in chasing games because I can do it. But even taking a step back with communication even more, from a sensory integration perspective, if I'm going to turn to look at someone when I'm speaking to them, that is an integration of my visual, my auditory, my vestibular, and my proprioception system. It's all those systems coming together in order for me to hear a sound, turn my head, and respond to it. That's quite a complex integrative process. And there's students that are struggling with that. But, you know, even taking it right step at those early bases of communication, a baby, what do? Babies start to lift their head up to look around. That's sensory integration. If we don't do that, if at that young age we don't have the postural control to bring our head up to look at who's talking to us, that's going to have an impact on our communication skills and our social interaction skills. So all of this is so entwined and so linked. Yes.
So interesting. I feel like we've covered a lot of what I wanted to cover within and out of our conversation, which is really good. But I suppose my last one for you would be, are there any myths around sensory processing that you would like to debunk? Are there any misconceptions that you frequently encounter that you think, oh, I just want to set the record straight on this one?
Okay, I suppose it's sensory processing is, we all do it. It's for everyone. It's not just an autism thing, an ADHD thing. You know, it is an everyone thing. So all of your students in your class will have different sensory integration and processing differences. So we need to have classrooms that can be adaptable and teaching styles that accommodate in everyone. So by making these small changes, it will impact the whole class. I suppose that's one of my myths. I had a few myths written down because I was like, I need to do it. The other myth is that sensory behaviours are just attention seeking or naughty. And again, I invite you to not consider that. This isn't a child being naughty. This is a child whose sensory systems have told you there's a threat to them. Yep, in a lot of cases. And they need to do something to keep themselves safe. Or it's a child or student with sensory systems where they can't do something. It's not I won't, it's I can't do what you've asked me to do. That's very different. And I think the other myth is, maybe it's not a myth, maybe it's some of the stuff that we encourage schools and classrooms to do can look silly. They'll be like, well, why are you putting a kid in a body sock? Actually, handwriting was their problem. Or why am I squashing with a gym ball? Because their difficulty is getting dressed for PE. So I suppose it's rather than a myth, it's an invitation again to understand that actually what we're doing when we look at some of our interventions, some of our personal interventions, when we do address that, is rooted in neuroscience. There's a reason why we're doing this. There's a reason why we may have to start at the sensory foundations and then work up to that reason for referral. But I think
important, and I think it goes back to what we said right at the start about, being evidence informed, listening to the experts, the occupational therapists who have, done the research on this. It's not just, we're just doing something for fun here. It is genuinely backed in research and evidence.
And so these are genuine behaviours. And the other thing I want to say is that we're talking about regulation here, and when I'm perceiving my body and the environment as a threat, these are real physiological sensations that students are feeling. Okay, we are getting ready for fight or flight. So their heart rate is going up, their respiratory rate is going up, they're getting sweaty, the adrenaline's pumping. So I'm now feeling tense in my body. These are real physiological sensations that students are feeling. They're not pretend, they feel it. It's real. In that moment, it's scary. It is so scary, and it is real for them. And we need to understand that and embrace that as well.
Yeah, and I think not dismissing it as well, isn't it? Just because you experience it in a different way. Oh, it's not too loud, or oh, it's not that bright, don't worry about it. And or there's sort of throwaway comments, which I get. You're in a busy classroom and you've got lots of children who are needing your time. But I think it's that dismissive thing of not recognizing that children are experiencing things in a different way, and that's valid and it's real.
Absolutely. And I've had many adults that we work with as well who'd say because their sensory experiences have been dismissed and not validated, that's led to trauma. They've either had to mask that. So for years they've been told, oh, it's okay, and they've just had to mask it and grin and bear it. Or if you're constantly being told your experiences aren't real, that does lead into a trauma response. And generally people feel that then throughout the rest of their lives. So absolutely, we need to validate. We need to really attune to people. To really get to know them and what their sensory systems mean. We need to do a lot more work with young people about understanding their own bodies, their own sensory cues, so they can then, well, then two things. They can then help us co-produce solutions, because co-production is always the best solution, especially in secondary schools. SENDCOs will come to me in secondary schools and say, what do we do for George? And I say, well, have you asked George? So co-produce. And so they can advocate for themselves as well, because they've got to learn to advocate for their own sensory systems. And again, I think, sorry, I'm moving off topic a little bit here, but in primary school, where we go from a very supportive environment in a lot of cases where students don't necessarily have to advocate for their own needs, that jump to secondary school can be horrific, because you're then in an environment where you have to advocate for yourself. And if you don't understand what's going on within your body, and if you don't understand what you then need to do about it. That's why I see many students in secondary school, it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
They end up leaving, and in primary school they manage to kind of do that. So my invitation here is for primary school settings especially, and absolutely start doing that interoceptive body cue, understanding self-advocacy work at that stage, when you are supported with people who know you really well, to support that transition.
Yeah, you're almost like giving them, in a sense, like a toolkit, aren't you, that's useful, because then these sensory differences, they're not, when they're older, they're still going to have to likely deal with these difficulties as well. So it's like giving them a toolkit and the autonomy to use it, isn't it? So things that will help them in situations that they will need it for, and to be able to say, no, this is too much for me, I can't manage this, and what will I do in that situation? I think that's really important, really, really important. You have been a brilliant guest, Beth, so much. I've learned so much. I've been sat here, I'm very aware that people on YouTube, if they're watching, I've just been sat here like, wow. Like listening along, because it's been fascinating stuff, really, really interesting. Is there a plug you'd like to do? Because obviously you come on here very, very generously with your time. You want to send people over to, your sensory inclusive schoolwork.
Absolutely, please.
So little shout out for those.
Absolutely, please come and find us at Sensory Inclusive Schools. We've got free courses on there that you can take to understand this more. We've got free resources, and we've also got options for you to access specialist support and advice if you want to. So please come along, access all the free stuff there, and let us know how we can help. So just find us at Sensory Inclusive Schools.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Beth. And a little shout out as well. We're now expanded I think I was telling Beth about this, we've expanded our Twinkle team. We've got a lot more support now for occupational therapy as well within Twinkle. So if people want to have a look at it, obviously as well, that would be great. But thank you ever so much for your time, Beth. Really, really appreciate it. You've been amazing. I've learned so much. It's been fantastic.
Thank you.